What's up, everybody? I hope your Tuesday is off to a good start or is in good progress, depending on what time you watch this video. Today, I'm giving an Israel update. I was planning to do another episode of Making Sense of the End Times, but I've been overtaken by current events that it would be remiss if I didn't update you about them. So you probably have heard that Israel and Hamas are at the cusp of a ceasefire, and it's to be announced anytime between now and the next 48 hours. Now, the Israeli media is somewhat unanimous in its opinion that the current ceasefire about to be announced is basically the fruition of major pressure that was brought to bear by the incoming President Trump administration on Israel's Netanyahu. Now, you may recall that President Trump said several weeks ago that there'd be hell to pay in the region if there wouldn't be a hostage deal before Inauguration Day, and he repeated that threat just a few days ago. The problem is that President Trump doesn't have any leverage with Hamas itself. He does have leverage over Qatar and Egypt, both of whom are, let's say, Qatar is a sponsor of Hamas, and Egypt is probably the closest of any Arab nation's government to Hamas. So between those two, the United States does have leverage. For instance, in Qatar, America has a major naval base in which one of its fleets is housed. And Egypt, of course, is a recipient of much American aid, particularly defense, okay? It's given, it actually produces American Abrams tanks on its territory, and America equips its Air Force. It basically gives Egypt everything that Israel has for the most part. So it definitely has leverage with Egypt too. But what's being reported both out of Israel and the Arab media is that the pressure was brought to bear on Netanyahu. Now, are we talking about pressure in the form of sticks, pressure in the form of carrots, or a combination of the two of them? I can't tell you. I don't know the substance of the pressure that was brought on Israel, and nobody else is really talking about it. But supposedly, and it's been leaked by insiders to both the Hebrew and Arabic media, that the pressure mainly was put on Israel to make concessions, and that the only promise that Trump gave the Arabs, and it was a promise, he is said to have promised Hamas that at the end of the ceasefire, Israel will not be able to restart the war. Now, Israel won't say that publicly. There won't be any public proclamation by Israel to that effect. But it's basically being said that behind the scenes, President Trump has promised Hamas that he will not allow Israel to restart the war following the end of the ceasefire. Now, what does this ceasefire comprise of? It comprises of two stages. The first stage entails the release of 33 Israeli hostages under the category of humanitarian hostages. This includes female soldiers, this includes the elderly, as well as the sick, and 33 of them are under that category of humanitarian releases, okay? And they're to be released in stages over 6 weeks. The very first release comprising of just 3 soldiers, and then it's believed that every few days, a couple or a few of these 33 hostages will be released over a period of 6 weeks. Now, Israel presumes that a majority of those 33 are alive, but also realizes that some of them are dead. And Hamas has not told Israel how many of those 33 are alive versus dead, or the identities of those that are alive versus the dead. So, for instance, to be included among those 33, and I forgot to mention children, okay, among those hostages, presumed to be part of that group would be the youngest of the hostages, the children, including one who was 1 year old, or maybe even less than 1 year old when taken hostage. That would be the Bibas infant, okay, belonging to the Bibas family. But again, we don't know if he's alive or dead, okay? That 1 year old plus baby may be returned in a pine box or returned alive. We don't know, okay? But this first phase, again, comprising of 33 hostages, for which Israel has promised to release 5 Palestinian prisoners for every female in the group that's released, and an undisclosed amount of prisoners for every non-female in that first group of 33. Now, things get trickier for phase 2, which is to release the remaining 65 hostages, all of whom are male, considered by Hamas to be Israeli male soldiers, including those that really are in the Israeli army. In other words, they were taken captive as soldiers, or those that are of military age. Hamas considers both of those to be soldiers, okay, and is holding them and not willing to release them until phase 2. And phase 2 is much trickier because it's during phase 2 that Israel and Hamas are expected to come to some sort of agreement on all outstanding issues between the two of them. These issues include Israel's position along what's called the Philadelphia corridor. That's the border between the Gaza Strip and Egypt, through which Hamas had dozens and dozens of tunnels through which they received most of their arms for the last several years. Okay, it's obviously a key Israeli interest to remain on the Philadelphia corridor in order to keep Hamas from ever regrouping and rearming. Why is that important? Because it looks like at the end of this deal, Hamas will be left intact, okay? It's in tatters, but intact. Now, remember that one of Israel's war aims, in addition to getting back its hostages, was destroying Hamas as a governing body in the Gaza Strip, okay? Now, Israel will do everything it can to keep Hamas from being the governing body or authority, or returning to authority and power in Gaza. But it's not going to be part of the deal, their elimination as an organization. Also included in these negotiations concerning the day after is the government that will be established in the day after the war ends. Now, most of the world's powers, including the outgoing Biden administration, believes that a primary position within that governing body should be given to what's called the Palestinian Authority, or PLO, which presently governs the West Bank. Its leader is Mahmoud Abbas, and they were ruling Gaza until Hamas took over in 2005. Also being discussed, the United Arab Emirates, together with some other countries, possibly Saudi Arabia, have agreed to participate in a temporary military presence to help govern the Gaza Strip and to see this process through, okay, or to see this disengagement of Israel from the Gaza Strip through to its very end. I forgot to mention that as part of phase 1, Israel is to withdraw from most of the Gaza Strip, save that Philadelphia corridor that I spoke about just a few minutes ago. So, the United Arab Emirates, together with some other Gulf countries, including perhaps Saudi Arabia, will play a role in policing the Gaza Strip and making sure the two sides live up to their ends of the bargain and act as a transitionary force, leading to a final composition of a government there in the Gaza Strip. The last thing, of course, to be discussed would be the rebuilding of the Gaza Strip. Okay, Israel allowing unlimited amounts of financial aid to come in, as well as forces to construct the Gaza Strip. And of course, that's fraught with many risks, because Israel will do everything it can, rightfully so, to make sure that none of those rebuilding efforts are commandeered to rebuild Gaza's tunnel system, which Hamas used throughout the war and would love to have again to use in future wars. So, What do we gain from all this? What's the main story here? That a ceasefire is about to be announced, that the ceasefire came about as a result of a significant amount of pressure by the incoming Trump administration on Israel's Netanyahu. I don't know if that pressure was in the form of carrots, sticks, or both of the above. We'll find out in the weeks to come. But President Trump invested much of his personal reputation and credit, or let's say street cred, in this promise that he would bring this war to an end on Inauguration Day. And when he realized he didn't have much leverage with Hamas itself, and limited leverage, it would appear, with Hamas's Arab partners, he basically turned the bulk of his attention on Israel. This doesn't mean that he's going to betray Israel's key security interest in the years to come. We knew going into the Trump administration that he himself is unpredictable. Okay, none of this should surprise us. I'm not surprised at all by any of this. He's unpredictable, and there's going to be a lot of ups and downs over the next 4 years. In the main, we hope that it will be to a positive effect, the Trump effect, over the next 4 years. But of course, it's not going to be smooth sailing the whole way through. Again, there's going to be times we're pleased with what Donald Trump does in the region, as well as times that we're disappointed in what he does in the region. But we can never let go of the fact before our eyes that it's God. And I've repeated this in interviews as well as on my own channel. The Bible tells us, and I know most of us are Bible believers watching this, that it's God who raises kings and God who deposes kings. And therefore, we believe he's risen Donald Trump for such a time as this. And we will not fully understand that until it's in hindsight. For hindsight, as they say, is 20/20 vision. But going into it, okay, or going into the events themselves, or trying to predict them beforehand, it's impossible. So buckle up, and of course I'll be giving more updates as these things transpire. This is Steve the Tour Guide signing off. Bye-bye.